Okay, Math 85, I'm back with the second part of section 5.3. And I'm going to continue. I'm about toward the end of the page on page 456. And remember, we were looking at decimals and fractions and less than or greater than. So if you have the book, this is number 228. So who's bigger, 0.92 or 7/8? Well, we don't know. You can find out. So again, I'm going to change the fraction over to a decimal. I'm going to divide the bottom into the top. And again, if you want to check that on your calculator, you would punch in 7 divided by 8. That will give you the decimal. I want to show the long division because I know some people in the class have had some difficulty with it. So does 8 go into 7? No, too big. Put a 0 there if you want. Does 8 go into 70? Well, I know 8 times 7 is 56. I think I can get closer. 8 times 8 is 64. I think that's it. I think that's as close as I can get. So 8 times 8 is 64. I'm going to subtract down and make that a 10. So 70 minus 64 is 6. I'm going to bring down, I think I'm going to need to add another 0. Bring down that next 0 and I've got 60. Well, look it. That was pretty close. So that's pretty close to 60. So 8 times 7 is 56. I'm going to subtract what's 60 minus 56. It's just 4, and I needed that extra 0. So I did need my 3 zeros. So I'm going to bring that 0 down. Does 8 go into 40? It does 5 times. So 8 times 5 is 40. So that tells me that 7/8 is equal to 0.875. So let's go ahead and put that back in the problem. So I've got 0.92. Is that less than or greater than 0.875? So if I'm looking at the 92 and the 87, I can see that 0.92 is greater than. Remember lining them up in part section 5.1. You can line them up if you want to, and you will see that it is greater than. So let's do a negative. Is negative 0.75 greater than, less than or greater than negative 4/5? Now remember, in negative land, the smaller is the bigger because it's closer to 0. Remember that? So, did I do a negative 4/5 already or 4/5? I can't remember. So, I'm going to change that over to, I'm going to change 4/5 over. I'm going to divide the bottom into the top, just like we've been doing. And I know it's going to be negative. I'm going to put that negative in later. Does 5 go into 4? No, too big. Does 5 go into 40? It does, 8 times. So I really don't need that 0. So 5 times 8 is 40. So 4/5 is 0.8 as a decimal. So let's compare these two. I've got negative. Is that less than or greater than? And you just change that negative 4/5 over to negative. I'm going to put the negative in there now, 0.8. So remember, I've got negatives. So whoever is closer to 0, whoever is smaller, let me write that down. So, who's closer to 0? Negative 0.75 or negative 0.8? So negative 0.75, if I were to line them up, and look here and look here, 0.7 is smaller. So since it's smaller, it's actually bigger in the negatives, so it's greater than. Let me do one more of those with the negatives. Is negative 3/4 less than or equal to less than or greater than? Where am I getting equal to? I don't know. Is negative 3/4 less than or greater than negative 0.725? Okay. Now, we might remember that negative 3/4, A quarter is 0.25, a half is 0.5. Well, what would 3/4 be? 3/4 is 75 cents. So it's really 0.75, or negative 0.75 because we're in negatives. So you would get the same answer if you long divided that out. So let me rewrite this. So is negative 0.75 less than or greater than negative 0.725? So remember, smaller is bigger in negatives. So who is the smaller? I'm looking at the 0.75 and the 0.72. The negative 0.725 is smaller. It's closer to 0. So this is bigger. So we say negative 0.75 is less than negative 0.725. Because since negative 0.725 is smaller, it's closer to 0, it really is bigger. Okay, now I'm going to look at, I'm on the bottom of page 4, 5, 6. They are giving me two fractions and a decimal. And I want to put these in order from small to big. Now we're doing the very same thing, so by this time you know you're long dividing. And you can just, like I said before, you have your TI-30XS calculator. You can divide these out, and I think that's what I'm going to do because I've done a bunch of examples, and I think you can do these now on your own. So 3/8, I'm just going to punch that in. And that equals 0.375. Seven over 20. I think I did do that one. Yes, I did do that one. If you look back in the prior video, that was 0.35. So I've got 0.375, 0.35, and 0.36. So let's see how these line up. So I want to put these in order from small to big. So who's the smallest? Here's the smallest. Next is the 0.36, and the biggest is the 0.375. And that's all they want you to do. So they want you to take a look at at fractions. Whoops, there they are. Change them over. You changed them over to decimals. and then put an order from smallest to biggest. It's not too bad, especially if you do it on the calculator. So let's try another one of those. I've got 0.702, 13 over 20, which I believe I did. I already changed that over, and 5/8. And I think I might have changed that over too. So let's look at 13 over 20. And if you punch that in, yes, I did that one also. That is 0.65. I believe I did that in the prior video. 5/8. 0.625. So we've got 0.702 and 0.625. So we want to put them in order. So looking .625 is smallest because of the 0.62. What would be next? 0.65, and then the biggest is 0.702. So again, I'm just putting these in order. I'm changing them from fraction to decimal, which you can do with long division. You can check it on your calculator. That's always nice. So let me do a negative. And again, just to remind you, in negatives, smallest is biggest. So it would kind of be the reverse in negative. So we know 3/4. We talked about that. So that's negative 0.75. Negative 7/9. I know it's negative. Now when I'm putting this in my calculator, I'm getting a bunch of 7s and an 8. So I'm glad I did something like that. So it's negative 0.777. I mean, the 7s go on, and then there's an 8. They round it for you at the end. And negative 0.7 just stays the same. So I'm glad we did this one on the calculator. So let's line these up. I've got negative 7.5, negative 7.778, and negative 0.7. Okay, I'm going to look at the first two. If you need to line them up, if you want to put a 0 here, you can. If you want to line these up, and remember, we're looking for the smallest one That's going to be our biggest. When we're working with negatives. So, who is the smallest? So, this one right here. So really, that's going to be our biggest, right? This is going to be our biggest because it's the smallest. We're in negatives. So, the biggest is really the smallest. So this is the smallest in negatives, followed by, and this is the largest because it's the smallest. It's closest to 0. Closest to 0. Now, on the top of page 457, there's some PEMDAS, and these are just really difficult doing by hand. So if any of these would happen to be on a test, I'm sure they would be on the calculator part. So just to show you this is number 244 in the book if you have it. So, of course, with PEMDAS, I'm going to do parentheses first. So, I'm going to punch that just as it is into my calculator. And I'm getting negative 14.4. And I'm just putting the parentheses in because I have a negative. If you don't want the parentheses, you don't have to. And now multiply your negative 14.4 by 30. And I'm getting negative 432. So these are much easier to do on the calculator. And I'm going to do a hard one here. This is 251. And like I said, these would always be on the calculator part of the final exam. So this is 251 on 457. 10 divided by 0.1 plus 1.8 times 4, I put the times in there for you, minus 0.3, that whole 0.3 squared. So what am I going to do first? You don't really need the parentheses here. I just put it in that way because that's how it's written in the book. So we have exponents. So let's do this first. So I'm going to just, and I like to keep everything, let's see, I'm not going to do parentheses there. So I'm going to put that in 0.3 with parentheses around it, raised to the second power, and I'm getting 0.09. So I did exponents. I'm going to multiply, divide. Remember, we go left to right. So what comes up first, multiplying or division? Well, I'm going to do division. So I'm going to do this first because that comes up first, left to right. So I'm going to punch in 10 divided by 0.1, and I'm getting 100. And I'm just bringing everything else down. Okay, and next, I'm going to multiply, bringing that 100 down, 1.8 times 4. And I'm getting 7.2. And then I'm going to bring the 0.09 down. Are you with me so far? We're just using the calculator. It makes it a lot easier. And last, I'm going to add, subtract, left to right. So I'm going to add these two together. And I'm going to get 107.2. And I'm going to bring the minus 0.09 down. And that's the last thing I'm going to do. That's going to give me my final answer. And I'm getting 107.11. So this is my final answer. The rest of the chapter, the rest of the homework rather, on 457 would also be more difficult problems to put in your calculator. And then the circumference and area of the circle, which is on the bottom of 457, I'm not doing that. We're not doing that. So I'm going to stop there, and that's the end of 5.3. In the next video, I'm going to 5.4, which is solving equations with decimals. So I will post these two as soon as I can. And again, if you ever have any questions, please email me and let me know.